Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gov Resources presentation of the three must-ask questions before retiring. My name is Jeff Rediger. I am founder and managing partner of our parent company, Fed Resource. Gov Resources is a division that we started 3 years ago to help each of you at the state and local levels understand your pension and provide resources to get your questions answered as you prepare for retirement. You can follow me on LinkedIn. For those of you that are viewing the presentation today, it's Jeff Rediger on LinkedIn, and we provide and post very good content for public employees. That's what we're focused on. For those of you listening in, it's Roediger. I will also tell you at the end of this session, for those viewing the event, there will be a brief survey and expression of interest on anything we cover. So please hang on, and your feedback is very important. It will be a brief survey, and we'd love for you to participate in that. Also, you can put questions and comments, and we won't be opening the lines up today just because we want to keep this within a half an hour. If you're listening and have questions, feel free to call, pick up the phone and call us at 888-545-8840. And you can address your questions with us, or you can email us at info@govresource.com. info@govresource.com. You can also go to our website, fedresource.com or govresource.com for resources and information. So I will make it clear that this session today is not endorsed, sponsored by any government agency. We're not affiliated with any insurance or advisory firm, nor is this event sponsored or endorsed. And that goes for not only Fed and Gov Resource, but our affiliate, Fed Resource Benefits Network. We have been fortunate over the years to have contracts individually with government agencies to conduct workshops and web events, but this event in of itself is not sponsored or endorsed by any third party. We also don't do this alone. I'll introduce our guest today, who is a financial planner and has helped each of you in the Chicago and Illinois state and teacher retirement systems over the years, and is a great asset to what we do. But before I do that, let me mention our mission statement, which is to educate government employees on their three-tiered retirement by assessing your current financial situation, guiding you through the coordination of your benefits, and helping you prioritize your retirement goals and objectives, all while minimizing unexpected risks to help you achieve financial security and freedom. So with that being said, as I mentioned, we don't do this alone. And we're very fortunate across the country to work with really, really good financial planners that specialize in the public sector. And fortunately for us, we have affiliation with Shawn Wares. Shawn, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Would you give the audience a little background on your planning practice and your specialization in working with Illinois public employees?
Sure. Right out of college back in around 2002, I started as a financial advisor, just kind of really working with anyone. And at that point, I thought it would be a nice way to kind of specialize. So after spending a few years as what I would call a financial advisor, I went into the wholesale market and actually worked for Guggenheim and Altegris, where I consulted financial advisors on how to build their own practices. And after spending a large amount of time going around the country visiting high net worth financial advisors and learning about their practice, what I found was that I wouldn't give money to 98% of these high net worth Barron's 1000 financial advisor guys. What I found was there was people like us that were educating them on how to build their book of business, how to build their portfolios. So then I went off into my own about 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, and really specialized and honed in with Lincoln Investment to the public pension market and working with a lot of folks in the TRS and SIRS. And what I found was that there was a lot of misinformation out there. And because of the climate in the state of Illinois, there was a lot of opportunity to educate a lot of folks like yourselves that are probably on the call.
Well, it's important, and we're going to talk about that in this session today on why it's important to have somebody that understands the benefits like you do and also is independent. So before we get into the subject matter, could you talk about your affiliation more with Lincoln? You're a certified financial planner and just your affiliation with Lincoln Investment.
Sure. So Lincoln Investment is a comprehensive independent financial planning company. I have to give our disclosure that advisory services offered through capital analysts or Lincoln Investment, registered investment advisors, securities offered through Lincoln Investment broker-dealer, member FINRA, SIPC. The views and opinions expressed herein are those of me, Shawn, and may or may not represent the views of capital analysts or Lincoln Investment. The material presented is provided for informational purposes only. Nothing contained herein should be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell any securities. As within all investments, past performance is no guarantee of future results. No person or system can predict the market. All investments are subject to risk, including the risk of principal loss. We have to give that compliance disclosure basically because we're duly registered. So we can operate as a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor as well. However, what Lincoln Investment does is we have a lot of payroll slots with high schools and local colleges, not just in Illinois, but across the United States. And we're very familiar with working with that type of clientele. We're based, our home office is based out of Philadelphia. I think that we wrote the first investment 403B account in the Philadelphia public school systems.
Well, and it's important to have somebody like you to educate and guide these Illinois employees who are attending and listening in, because it's a critical time in the world of public retirement. So with that said, here's what we're going to cover today, and these are all very important subjects. Again, if you jumped on a little late, at the end there will be a expression of interest survey. So as we go through this, you have an opportunity to ask questions in the comment section, and we'd like to address those individually with you. You can also check boxes off of any areas that we cover you'd like more information on. Number one, how proposed changes could impact your pension retirement income and what steps you can take to offset these reductions in benefits. Number two, what are the 403B, 457 contribution limits and determining whether or not you're taking too much risk in your allocation. And number three, who do you get your retirement advice from? I personally think number three is the most important based on my experience in working with public employees as well as financial advisors. And we're going to talk about some tips that may help you avoid dealing with somebody that doesn't have your best interests at heart. So let's get into the details. Why are your benefits changing? Well, the bottom line is the government's broke. I don't want to get into the gory details of it. We can blame all sides of the aisle, but politicians on both sides have just kicked the can down the road. Now you've got a unfunded pension liability at the state and local levels across the country of over $6 trillion. Now, some will say that's a couple trillion too much, or some say it's a couple trillion less. But when you're talking trillions, that almost gets irrelevant at this point. The national debt is over 22 trillion now. So here's the problem. The feds have no money to bail out the states. We're going to get into a little bit about some of what's gone on legally to protect some of these pensions. And we share this with you so you're educated. And Shawn is there to help guide you if you choose to seek help in making sure that you still have a viable retirement. There's a lot you can do, but education's power, and that's why we're conducting this session. So the pension tsunami's here. It is not just Illinois, although Illinois is in trouble, let's face it, it's across the country. And one of the big reasons why the life raft is starting to sink is because of what occurred with our federal Congress at the end of 2014. A lot of people don't know this, and you can Google it, research it yourself. But ERISA was a law that was passed in the early 70s to protect each of you from having your pensions cut. It's a guarantee. It was for employees so that you can be taken advantage of by employers. Well, as pension management and longevity has increased over the decades, the mismanagement of the pension funds has also become subject to manipulation in some cases. And now it's, we'll get into some of the numbers, but what's occurred is that there's no money. And so at the end of 2014, ERISA actually, through Congress, as part of the budget and congressional legislation, they allowed trustees of these pension systems, state and local pensions included, to cut benefits as a last resort. It was part of a controversial spending bill. I'm surprised it didn't get more media attention, but it's there and it's starting to happen. I know that in the state of California, where I hail from, they're already cutting retirees' pensions, in some cases 60%. You can research that yourselves. But the bottom line is this federal spending bill included provisions for troubled pensions plans to slash benefits. And that's what's starting to happen. It was either cut or crash. And Congress decided to cut, and they buried it into a law and a bill and a budget that most people really didn't focus on. So that brings up some questions, specifically for those of you in Illinois. What you need to know before taking your pension annuity. The typical questions are single life annuity or joint and survivor. Do you have an option, or will you have an option in the future to take a lump sum versus the payout? What are the tax consequences? And then how healthy is your government pension plan? Well, Illinois' pension is in big trouble. There's numerous articles about, the Illinois Public Retirement System pension funds. Some think it's a pyramid scheme now. That's documented, as well as in Pension Crisis, according to Chicago Business, time is not on the side of the employee. So Shawn, you deal with this all the time. And for the audience out there, what are the big changes in the pension system that the audience should be aware of that probably stand out and they need to do some research on?
Sure. So when you look at the state of Illinois and how the federal doesn't have the money or may not have the money to bail us out here in Illinois, one thing I look at, and our friends at the Illinois Policy Institute do a great job of covering this. It might not be in mainstream media, but they do a really good job of keeping up with the public pensions here in Illinois. And one thing is under law, Illinois pension funds need to be 90% funded by 2045. And the new administration in the state of Illinois is looking to bump that out another 7 years. But TRS, which is the largest pension of the 5 public pensions out there, is pretty much adamantly against that. So what we've seen is that of the 5 public pensions, TRS holds by far the largest public pension debt, $75 billion unfunded liability. It's roughly 40% funded, and it has to get to 90 by 2045. So it's, when you talk about a tsunami, it's, tick, tick, tick. We're on the clock type situation. We'll kind of stay with TRS and talk about some changes we've seen there. What we've seen is some of the younger teachers have came in under a different level of pension and have been subject to different retirement ages and different rules and regulations for their pensions, because maybe or may not, the state of Illinois probably can't afford the TRS, put everybody on the TRS 1 public pension that is currently so popular and has been quite a drain for the state of Illinois. So what you've seen is they've added different levels. I've also seen that they've promoted more of the 403B and 457s as ways to save for retirement, because now that we have different scales of TRS 1 and 2, what you're seeing is that those that came in after TRS 1, the 403B and the 457 plans, become even more important, because they're going to need that to supplement their public pension, because they're not going to get the full benefits that those in TRS 1 have received or will receive, because there are still some teachers out there that are still under that plan as well.
Well, and for those that are viewing the presentation, if you're listening in, teacherpensions.org is a great third-party resource. It's a third-party think tank of economists who study this, and they grade every pension. And what, Shawn, what you were talking about, the reason there's tiers now is because in the Illinois teacher retirement, their grade's an F. But what really stood out to me, one of the reasons it's an F, is because 79% of the teacher pension contributions go toward debt. That's a really scary percentage. And that's why the tiers are there. So, those in the audience are probably like, okay, now you've just made me depressed, or you've shared all this bad news. What do we do? Well, you need to get with somebody like Shawn or Shawn and his team and go through a pension, a defined pension, and qualified retirement assessment. And Shawn's done quite a few of these. We work with over 670 pension plans across the country, and it's important for each of you to understand where you're at right now. If you retire in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and put some variables in there of looking at a reduction or taking out inflation. And it does not matter which tier you're in. Shawn and his team can walk you through what your income estimate is going to look like and the benefits along the way. So that's number one. So at the end of the session, you can request a complimentary assessment. Shawn has agreed to not charge for his time. We're not completely altruistic with this. We are both for-profit entities, but we feel it's important for each of you to, have an understanding of where you're at and what your options are, and that's what we're here for. So that's number one, to understand where you're at, because there are a lot of issues out there, and we, last thing we want, I feel like our mission as a company is to help each of you before you get to that point. You're into retirement a couple of years, and all of a sudden the clock turns another year and your pension's cut. You need to be prepared for that. And that leads us to the second topic, which is, what are the contribution limits and what are the risks associated with your 403B and 457? These particular tools are going to be even more important now than before, because of the pension erosion they're putting more of the burden on you to make the contributions. But now you got to understand, how do you get to your money? What are the penalties if you take it out? What are the tax issues? And I think very important, I'll bring you back in here, Shawn, is the contribution limits now in 2019, taking advantage of those and understanding what the different tools on are. Would you share with the audience what some of these limits are and what stands out to you as far as the contributions in these plans?
Sure. So one thing that the government really didn't do for a long time was increase the retirement plans effectively, making it so it kept up with even inflation. So if any of you remember back in the 80s and 90s, the IRA contribution limit was stuck at like $3,000 for a long time, or around $3,000.
Yeah.
What you're seeing now is the government is really being more and more active of raising these contribution limits, if not every year, maybe every other year, and trying to provide a portal or a place for you to put money somewhere that you control that no one will have access to except for you. And that's really what these 401ks, 403b, and 457s are. You're 100% vested in most situations right away from dollar one. In the 403b, 457 market, it is a little rare to get an employer match that you see in the 401k world. But having that said, that just means that your 403b and your 457, you're 100% vested right away. As opposed to 401k, there are some provisions that have some, you got to, wait a certain amount of years to have 100% vested in your plan. But the fact that these are going up, in fact, the fact that they added a catch-up phrase for those 50 and above at $6,000, so you could put in $25,000 for calendar year 2019, I think is fantastic, because for every dollar that you put in to one of these plans, in most situations, what it will do is help provide you some income tax deduction when you go to file your taxes. And especially in Illinois, where the state and local income taxes are capped at $10,000, like everywhere else in the United States, in Illinois, they're even more important because the property taxes are generally so high in the state of Illinois.
Yeah. Well, and then we're going to get into, at the end here, I'm going to have you talk about some fees attached to some of these products that are associated with the 457s and 403Bs. So we'll address that before we wrap up. But, there is decision risk, contribution risk, tax risk, but there's also risk of how you're allocated. I mean, again, you have all these different asset classes to choose from, products to choose from, vendors to choose from, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. But, as we look back almost 11 years now to the last, major recession in this country, the correction in 2008, the real estate bubble burst, and a lot of people in 403Bs, 401Ks, 457s, it wasn't out of line for some people to lose 30, 40% of their portfolio. But I'd like to share a little trick that the investment companies do play, because they make it seem like you lose 30, you get 30 back, and everything's even. And that's not the case. And this is why it's a volatile ride, and you need to be aware of it, because let's face it, the correction will occur again, and you don't want to be a year or two from retirement and have to defer it. In 2008, we spoke to many public employees that had to push their retirement back, a couple of years because they lost, a large amount in the market. So let's say you have 200,000 in a 403B, and let's say that was in 2008, and you lost 30%. Well, that means you were compounding on 140,000. You lost $60,000. Well, what do you need to get that? What do you need to get back to 200,000? Well, conventional wisdom and what the portfolios will tell you and what they show you on annual reports and statements is that Well, you lose 30 in 2018, you get 30 back in 2019, you're even. Well, that's not the case, because if you lose the one time in math where 30 minus 30 does not equal zero is when you've lost 30% of your portfolio and you're compounding on 140,000. So the reality is you need to get a 43% return just to get even. So you got to take more risk just to get even after you've lost a substantial part of your portfolio. And the point we're making here is there's a point of no return. And you don't want to cross that line, because it, to catch up would cost time, effort, stress, which is, a lot of psychology comes into this. And there are ways that you can manage it, because I think when we start out in life as a financial plan, we look at a straight path from point A to B. In reality, you've got a lot of storms to weather, peaks and valleys. We just don't want you standing on the peak when you're looking a year or two into retirement and then have a tsunami occur where you get pushed all the way back and now you've got to make up ground. So we have a really unique little tool that we can send you, and at the end, cell number or email, we'll send it over, and it's an app, and you can put it on your smartphone or iPad, tablet, and it walks you through in a very simplistic manner what your risk tolerance is. And it's a good starting point. It's not to replace solid financial planning that Shawn and his team would do for you, but it's a good starting point to say, hey, am I over leveraged in my investment strategy for retirement? And what am I comfortable risking to determine a certain result? And so you would just punch in how much is in your 403b, and it would ask you questions. If let's say somebody had $500,000 in their 403b, would they be willing to risk 70,000 or 14% of it to generate a 21% return? If so, that would generate on a scale of 1 to 100 based on the algorithms they do, risk tolerance, all this data, a number of 66. So in this example, somebody goes through this, their risk numbers is 66, but their allocation in the retirement setup is an 88. They're out of whack, which means if there's a correction, they're going to take it a lot harder because they aren't prepared for it. And that's the psychology. So you compare your desired risk number to an actual risk assessment, and that's a starting point, and that can be a good guide for you. So at the end, if you just like to take the test or no cost to do it, it's confidential, we'll send you the information. And then if you'd like to compare it to how you're set up, that's where Shawn and his team can come in and say, hey, you probably need to take a look at reallocating how you're set up, and maybe even the vendor you're using. I'm not saying good or bad about any of these groups. It's just everything together needs to be looked at, and we can help you with that. So find out your risk number. And then finally, I think this is the most important one. My parents were taken advantage of by an unethical so-called financial advisor, so it's close to my heart. But who are you getting your retirement advice from? I personally believe, and one reason why we work with Shawn and his team and others like him across the country is I like the independence. I like independent financial planners versus somebody that's representing a company. Now, every financial planner, and I'll let Shawn talk about this a little bit more, and he mentioned it earlier, is affiliated with somebody to park their licenses and run their business through regulations and ethics and states, and every state has different requirements. But what I like about Shawn is he's independent, can do financial planning, isn't pushing one particular product. We see that potentially being a a lack of interest on the part of an advisor to focus on you as the individual versus hitting a quota that could send the family to Cabo or something. That's not the way financial planning and consulting should be set up, but that unfortunately a lot of times is the way it's set up. So, Shawn, what separates your firm and what you do in the state of Illinois from all these other so-called advisors out there that those attending could get advice from?
Sure. So for us at Lincoln Investment, and that's who I trade under, and practice under, one of the biggest things that is different than the rest of them is that we have no product. So we're not pushing one product or another. We're really sitting with you to understand your risk tolerance, understand your wants, needs, and goals, and coming to you with a plan that gives you the best or one of the best routes to get to your end goals. Another interesting thing that I've noticed that a lot of firms do not have is our paperwork. I know it sounds crazy, but our paperwork has places for the employer to sign off or the third-party administrator to provide their approval on these transactions that need to occur, such as if you're looking to move a 403B or a 457 plan. Because if you don't have, it's such a minor detail, but if you don't have those spaces on your paperwork, you have to get a letter provided by your employer or your third-party administrator of your 403B 457 plan. Now, having that said, that those are, two maybe small but big difference makers that separates us. The other one that I want to really talk to folks about is what I see currently in the marketplace for 403B and 457. There's really three product lines that I see that are typically sold in that market, and that's fixed annuities, which operate similar to a CD, but they're not FDIC insured. They provide you a guaranteed rate of return. However, that guarantee is provided by the insurance company, not an FDIC or a bank. The second route is mutual fund investments that are inside of a portfolio with a direct investment firm. And the third one is a variable annuity. The variable annuity is a life insurance product. It has a lot of embedded fees inside of it that generally aren't disclosed on statements that are sent quarterly or annually to the clients. And that's where you get a little confusion in my experience from what I see is a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm not being charged any fees on this account. Whereas your account, I see the fees that are itemized and listed out every single quarter. And it's really the old hat of you got to know what questions to ask. So if you have a statement from an insurance company and you're not sure if it's a variable annuity or not, you really want to look at a couple of red flag items that you'll see on your statement. It'll say policy statement number or contract number. Those typically means that you're in some form of an insurance policy or contract and not a direct investment account. When you have a direct investment account, typically it'll say account number, and you'll see what your fees are itemized on usually every statement. Where you typically do not see that is in the variable annuity world. So you could really have some fees that you're not even sure that you have that are embedded into the cost of the variable annuity contract. So it's very important to make sure that you're really looking at what you own, because just because it's not disclosed doesn't mean you're not paying it, and it does affect your performance.
Well, we have an example that I'm going to share as we wrap up here that directly centers around the variable annuity, but a couple other things that stand out about Shawn and his firm is that they're fiduciaries. And that's a question I think if you're working with somebody that is giving you retirement advice, I would ask them that question immediately. If they say they balk or they can't articulate the fact that they are very quickly, you may want to find somebody else. Fiduciaries are held to a higher standard, additional licensing. They have to be very transparent and put your interest above theirs. So that is number one when it comes to retirement planning. Number two, obviously Shawn and his team work with you. They understand your benefits. I mean, in the last 20 minutes, he's pointed out some areas specifically that let you know that he understands your benefits. If you have a foot problem, you're not going to go to the cardiologist. And I think, unfortunately, there's such a broad view of financial planning. You really need, especially each of you out there, in a critical time with your pension systems, you need to have somebody to understand your benefits. And that's why we've decided in our company to work with specialists who are fiduciaries and financial planners, and Shawn fits that mold. So what I wanted to mention is that here's the reason why you have to be very diligent about who you work with. And choosing a fiduciary is going to keep you out of harm's way. We're going to somebody who understands your benefits. In the summer of 2017, at the federal level, they're similar to you. Some of you may have a spouse, partner, family member that works at the federal, or maybe some of you are former federal employees. The TSP is the federal level 401k, and very low cost. And in the summer of 2017, there were 4 so-called financial advisors. They weren't advisors, they weren't fiduciaries. They weren't putting the best interests of these people at heart. They moved $40 million in 200 accounts out of TSPs into variable annuities. And Shawn, you just pointed out some of the concerns if you're not doing something that's ethical with a variable annuity, the fees, cost, and the reason these guys got in trouble by the SEC, they were charged with fraud, is because they not only did not disclose the details, fees, commissions of the variable annuities. There's probably $2 million of commissions attached to the transaction, I would think, wouldn't you, Shawn? $40 million.
Yeah, it's tough too, because once you're in those, they have surrender charges, and
Right.
I've seen them as low as 5 years and as long as 12 years. And then I've seen some of them, for every dollar you put into a variable annuity, it resets the calendar for a rolling 6 years. So for every dollar you put in, if you're dollar cost averaging into a variable annuity, every dollar you put in, it won't be surrender free for at least 6 years
for
on one
example, so for example, somebody has 100,000 of variable annuity in year one, what, 6-7% charge just to get out of it?
It depends on the provider, but it can be. They generally start out, very high, and usually it's a declining scale of percentage, depending on how they've structured their surrender charges. But the other big one that's embedded into the cost of variable annuity that isn't really disclosed that I've seen on any statements is the mortality expense ratio. And I've seen those as high as 1.4, 1.36% per year. So you can imagine, take a scenario where you have a public service employee who has a 403B or 457 plan, and they have several $100,000 inside of that plan, and they're in a product that's charging them not just the mortality expense ratio, but also the underlying cost of the individual mutual fund that they're invested in inside of that portfolio. They could easily have a scenario where they're contractually obligated under surrender charge, and then their break even per year is north of 2% per year before they even make any type of return. So if the market is up 1%, they could be in a situation where they still have a 1% loss, even though the market was positive for that year.
And then you compound the fact that these guys, and they're gone. So fraud charges, we think one left the country. But the point is that they, not only did they move people into these annuities and didn't disclose the commissions and fees, but these so-called advisors, who were just brokers, actually said they were endorsed by the government. So, now you got 200 plus people that are dealing with surrender charges, fees, and understanding the products, probably getting attorneys, and you talk about a nightmare. So I share this with each of you because I want you to know that just like in any industry, you have those that seek to do evil. But there are good people out there. You just have to make sure that you educate yourself and find the right person to deal with, so you don't have to deal with something like this. And we share that just so that you're aware. So as we wrap up, a couple things. Take advantage of the complimentary benefit and retirement assessment we're offering. A lot of times you can go to your HR department and get a pension estimate. That's fine. You can call your vendor and get or go online and get your statement of your 403B or 457. You can go to the Social Security website and get your PDF of your Social Security statement. But the reason this assessment that we're offering is different is because you can look at all this in one snapshot. You can look at different ages, you can look at different taxes, you can look at different variables. And then you can have somebody that deals with this all the time look at it and say, okay, you need to make a couple changes in this area. And that's where we come in. So at the end of the session, check the box if you'd like more information on a personal retirement pension assessment for you. And again, that's something we're doing complimentary. And somebody like Shawn can even work with you on what your fixed expenses would look like, because a lot of times people think that they can live off of 75% of what they were, their expenses were when they were actively working, but that's not a number that fits everybody. I've seen situations where it's 100% of what your expenses were in retirement based on your health insurance and long-term care and everything else that's occurring in this world. So you need to really take the time before you're forced into a decision or you're ready to retire to make sure you know where you're at. And so we do offer that. In addition, get your risk number. You can check the box and we'll send you over a link so that you can walk through that. No obligation there. And then, you know, Shawn's also offering 30 minutes of retirement consultation at no charge. So if you're interested in getting a second opinion of where you're at, I'm telling you right now is a good time to do it, especially before there's any more cuts and before another recession hits specifically. So, Shawn, I want to thank you. I appreciate your input, some great information there today. So I know you're busy, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
And for those of you that are listening in on the podcast today, give us a call, 888-545-8840, and we will get the information that's on the survey over to you so that you can share with us your comments and concerns and also request any information we share today. And then please hang on for those that are attending the web event. There will be a brief survey populated, and your feedback's very important. So we're here to help each of you. Our mission is to be of service and to find financial resources for public employees. And so whether we can be of service to you today or the future, we're here. So your feedback is very important. This concludes our session, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you very much. Make it a great day.